The Hall of the Federation was a magnificent construction. From its acoustically perfect auditorium in which sat the dignitaries of the 111 species that made up the Galactic Federation, to the one-piece carved crystal dome spanning the auditorium that highlighted the Otra Nebula overhead. The building was meant to impress, to awe, and to emphasize what could be achieved when the races worked together. On this day, the Federation Assembly had convened to welcome the newest of its members to join with the other races in the peace and prosperity of the Federation. They were called human. Their induction to the Federation had been short, 75 of their years as they calculated time. Most races were not called to join until at least 200 years, as this was considered sufficient time to test their moral fibre, their heart. Speculation was rife as to why this had occurred. However, since nearly every species got along well with the humans, no one objected. Were they different? Not really. Mammalian. The Federation had 55 such species. Bipedal, 97. Heavy welders, 36. Smarter. On the Varant scale of intelligence, they reached at about 6 out of 10. What advanced them to full membership in such a small space of time was actively argued and wagered upon, but never discovered. The Grand Chancellor of the Federation knew, as he had been the one to push from behind the scenes for the humans to be inducted because he had been there. Terran sat in the Grand Chancellor's ornate chair and listened to the speeches of the inductees and the Federation members. Some of them were humorous and brought out a cacophony of laughing from the members, which was really quite disturbing given the multitude of organs that made the sounds. Slowly, Terran flipped the small silver disc in the grasping edge of his wingtip. The disc was unremarkable, well worn slightly bent towards the middle, where it appeared to have been melted, obscuring most of the writing that had been on the disc. The good humour of the auditorium lulled Terran's mind back to that place, lost behind 55 years of life experiences. The humans had only recently explored into Federation space and, when met, enthusiastically provided personnel to integrate with the task force assigned to patrol the outermost frontier while assessment was made of their species. Terran had been a combat patrol leader at that time, based on the patrol ship, Bright Star, a small scout ship. He had heard of this new race called human, but as yet had not met one. Rumour had it there were a number of humans on the other patrol ships in the group acting as non-combatant observers. When the alert had sounded, the patrol group raced to the source of the alarm. Oratan, a world to the edge of patrol space that had been settled by a small number of Terran's own species, the Avarice, and 4 other groups in the Federation. For a winged species, the planet was a paradise of tall hills, moderate breezes with forests of tall native trees, on its way to becoming a resort planet. As the patrol ships exited jump space, they had been beset by ships of an unknown design. Although surprised, they gave as good as they got. Eventually, to save what crew they could, both sides headed for the planet in their heavily damaged ships. Landing did not go well for either side, with more losses. On the ground, Terran assembled what forces he could and marched to the only town on the planet that, from where they had landed, could be seen burning not far away. Terran did not have a word for what they marched into. He had since found one that had come from the humans he met later in life. Hell. They had marched into hell. The blooded, partially eaten corpses of the town's populace were strewn everywhere. The enemy was sighted. Large, bipedal, 4-armed beasts, tearing apart a screaming Avorium with their upper arms and eating the still-living flesh. The lower arms held a weapon of unknown potential that appeared to be made of a polymer-like material. As Terran and his patrol were noticed, the weapons were brought to bear and emitted a flash of plasma that obliterated 3 of Terran's comrades. Training kicked in, and he and his patrol hit the ground while returning fire, killing the 3 enemy before they could let off another burst. Not knowing if an alert had been sent to the Federation while their ships had been in space, Terran and his patrol fought a house-to-house battle for 13 days, slowly extracting the township citizens one by one against an agile and aggressive enemy. Of the 8 patrol ships of the group, a force of 41 personnel was all that was left, and Terran was the last remaining officer. He knew they would not survive if they remained in the town. The enemy had the advantage over his forces. With over 200 years of peace, his force was well trained, but lacked experience to fight an enemy that was aggressive to the point of madness, while not hesitating to feed off you if you fell. A strategic withdrawal was determined to be the best course of action. His patrol had not slept in days. They were exhausted both in body and in morale from the carnage they had seen. From the vantage point of a hill outside the town, they could hold the enemy at a distance. The sound of weapons fire within the town woke Turan from his lethargy. "Patrol leader!" cried out his forward observer. "The tower!" Raising his monocular towards the highest building in town, Turan felt his blood run cold. This is why there were so few females and children in the groups they had rescued. The rest of them had barricaded themselves in the tower, which was now surrounded by the majority of the enemy who were trying to force entry. He had nearly doubled the soldiers he had left, and had dismissed his retreat to concentrate on the tower. The remains of his patrol group lay all around him, injured and exhausted, some crying with impotency of their position, as they were told of what was occurring in the town. That was when Turan heard his first human laugh. It was not one of joy, but an ugly grunt of a sound. "Fuck it. Looks like it's going to be today," came the voice. Turan turned towards the sound and noticed for the first time the human. None of his patrol were in good shape, but the human looked like it had rolled in blood and been dragged behind a vehicle. The human's own blood still seeped from a large burn to his upper shoulder that had not been totally cauterized in the blast. The human slowly and painfully made his way to his feet. Ejecting the heavily used power pack from the Federation weapon it must have picked up, it clipped in another. With a stumble, the human began to walk towards the town. Passing Turan, he gave a half smile as he kept walking. "You'll die," Turan called in passing. "Everyone dies," grunted the human. "It is only how you live that matters." Without any attempt to conceal itself, the human walked towards the town, no longer caring about what was to come, never looking back. Slowly, Turan's remaining patrol stood. In ones and twos they wavered, then, after harnessing what little strength they had left, they staggered and limped after the human. A shambling mismatch of species heading towards oblivion, with Turan among them supporting an injured Fresian, who had fallen and started to crawl when Taran had lifted him up. Except for the growls and chants of the enemy, it was strangely still within the town. As Turan rounded the last corner near the tower, he saw that the human had stopped not 20 paces from the enemy, who in their hunger were totally focused on the tower. There were no stirring last words or battle cries. The human just opened fire in full automatic feed. It was slaughter. The enemy fell like harvested grain. Surprise had been total. Turan's patrol went to the fight from behind obstacles and buildings, devastating the enemy, while the human just stood in the open, killing the enemy as if he were hosing dirt off a wall. By the time the enemy could actively engage the patrol, the devastation for the human had been decisive. In their anger, the enemy focused on the only one they could clearly see, the human. Their plasma fire was so intense, it was like a new sun had formed. Their single-mindedness towards the human allowed Turan's patrol to decimate the remainder. Their victory was an anticlimax. No cheering, no inspiring music, no flag waving, just a wave of relief and exhaustion. Of the human, there was nothing left but carbonized ash that was already blowing away in the light breeze. Turan squatted beside the discolored ground to retrieve the remains of a necklace, holding 2 silver discs joined together, the lower disc falling off as Turan lifted it. The writing on both discs had been so badly damaged nothing could be read. Like the human, they were anonymous. To this day, Turan mused as he sat in the Chancellor's chair in that lofty edifice of the Federation Assembly. No one knew who the human was. With the death of all the humans in the patrol group and loss of some bodies in space, it could never be determined. Federation retaliation against the enemy had been swift. Once located, the home planet had been sterilized by order of the Federation Assembly, in the only unanimous vote ever recorded. The matter had been quietly pushed aside, as the humans were meant to have been protected non-combatants, and the Assembly at the time was concerned about the human response to their failure. Since that time, we have come to know humans better, however. By then it was too late. Speeches had been made and medals awarded. There was no going back. As far as Turan was concerned, that one human had earned for his people the right to be part of the Federation. Turan would have liked to have had a name, but all he could do was pray to the gods of his people, that wherever the unknown soldier was, he knew they had followed him that day. He was not alone at the end.